We're now using our backend and no longer using that typical code. Now, one thing for this app is when we send a new message, clicking send here, it goes to on send click, but it's not actually sending the message to the backend. It's just doing it locally in the browser. So we want to be able to save that message. How would we go about doing that? That's what we're going to do next. So here, when we click send, we want to make a request to the backend and say, hey, there's a new message. Here it is. Now, that's typically a post request because you're posting something. So the backend needs a post request now. If we go back to index.js, now we can go here and say app.post, and we can say /post as well, because this would be post/posts. So we can have the same path, but the different method. This is a totally different pathway because the method was changed. Now let's add the second function, request, the response. Now, if somebody comes in, hey, I want to add a new post. So we got to figure out, okay, how do we read that information? How do we store in the file? So first we got to find a way to read that from the request. So in the request, there will be something called the body. And then we're going to extract that information from there. And once we got that, first we need to read the file posts.json. And then we got to insert the new message to the end of this array in an object. Now we don't have all this extra information. We're just going to use an object with the title, okay? And then once we insert that, we got to overwrite the file post.json with the new version. Okay, now to get the body, typically we're going to do rec.body dot whatever is passed in. In this case, we could say maybe the title, like that. Or even the whole body if you think it's safe. But typically it's not good to read the whole body because some people might add additional stuff trying to do malicious stuff. So maybe you want to build your own new, let's call it new post here, as an object whose title is coming from the rec body.title. So here I create an object, and one property is title, and its value comes from rec.body.title. And I store that in the variable new post. Now, the reason I did this instead of directly using rec.body is, like I said, somebody might try adding additional properties that have nothing to do with what your app is doing in hopes that it might somehow make your program take that and do some malicious stuff. So be careful. You want to filter out all the undesired properties. And one way of doing that is if you just hard code the object here and select only the properties that you care about. Now, in order to use rec.body, we also need a middleware. Because as it comes from the request, we need to extract it somehow. So we need a middleware that will come between the request and response. And if it sees a body, it will take that, extract, and place it in a JavaScript object. So it will read the JSON, the string. It's just plain text, for example, and it will convert to an object, and it will make it available in request rec.body. Okay. Now, Express already had that built in, so we can just say here where we have all the use stuff. Remember, use is to apply middleware. We can say app.use, and then the middleware is express.json, and you call it as a function, like this. So when we do that, rec.body will properly extract that body as a JSON object. So we can use it like an object in JavaScript. Now, if you're curious about this, you could add a console log here and log the new post and so on. But the problem here is we have no way of making a post request in the browser just by going to the address bar, because remember, that's just for GET request. Typically, we have something like Postman. If you download the program Postman, that's a pretty good one to change the method to post. And otherwise, we'd have to type in the console of the browser fetch call with the method post and so on, which is actually the code we're going to write next. But anyway, you're going to see that right now. So let's just keep this like this for a while and go back to the front end. Now going back to the front end where we set the message, or we click send, it calls this function here on send click. So what we want to do is make a request to the server to post a new message. Now to make a request, we can call the fetch function. Now in this case, it's a little bit more involved because we're not only doing get, we're doing post. If you just have fetch with a string, that's just a get request. Now, if I want to make it a post, I got to change a few things. So first I'm going to say, okay, when I fetch from, what's the address? Pretty much the same thing as the other one. So we're going to paste that string. Now, comma, second argument. I want to say the method is going to be post. Like that. But I got to say, okay, what's the body? What do you want to send? Well, we got to send whatever new message is, right? So in that case, I want to send that in an object with a title being that new message. Now, this is an object. So you want to convert that to a string. So JSON.stringify this whole thing. Okay, let me repeat that. So we make a literal object here with the property title. And the value is going to be new message, which is what the user types in the input. That's next to send. Now, this object is a JavaScript object, right? We need to convert that to just plain text, but in the JSON format. So the JSON module has a function. If we say .stringify, it pretty much converts this object to a string, sequence of characters. I can demonstrate that in the browser if you're curious about that. Go to the console in the DevTools. Let's say I have an object, A, with title, hello world. Let me make that bigger because it's too small. Right? A is an object. Now if I say JSON.stringify A, this is what we get. It's pretty much a string in the JSON format. You can see there's quotes around title and then the value, colon the value. That's all it does, converting to plain text. Now we do that because that's the way fetch works. So we can send that in the body of the request. Now, when we call fetch like that, it returns a promise, right? Because it takes time to go to the server, wait for the response, come back. So it promises you it will give something if you wait. Now, the way promises work is if you want to fulfill this, when the promise is fulfilled, that is, when we got the data back, we can handle that. We say .then. So we can chain this, the result from the call to fetch with .then, and press a callback function here. And this callback will have the response object here. Now we need to extract the body from that response and convert that to JSON. So typically we would usually do a response.json, call the function, and that will return a promise with the value when fulfilled being the extracted body in JSON format. Now, because that's a promise that's returned here, if you want to follow up with, okay, I need to handle this promise, we got to do another then and chain it again. Now, this is going to be the post. Let's call it new or created post. It could be any value for the function. The function name here, the variable name, could be anything you want. I usually use the scripted names so I understand what they are. Okay, let me just console log that for you for now. So we're going to see that in the console, but we don't do anything with that just yet. Save that, and I'll show you how to debug the developer tools so you can see how to debug this. Anyway, so we made a fetch request to /post method post, and we include the body that is the new message. Now going back here to the backend, we're going to be able to see the react.body.title there. And then just for exercise for now, I'm going to say res.send new post. We haven't saved it yet. So we're just sending back what we received, right? Now let's go back here to the browser. And I want to teach you how to debug. Let's see. So in Chrome, I think you got to click the sources tab in Chrome. But if you're in Firefox, it's debugger. And I can see the source code here, app.js. And I'm going to go to the place where I make this request. Remember, we just wrote this. What I want to see is, okay, what's the value of created post? I'm trying to debug to understand if it's coming correctly, coming back to us. So I'm going to place what's called a breakpoint in line 26 if I click the line number. A breakpoint means the program will run, and when it reaches this line, it will stop for you. So you can debug and see what's going on in the surrounding area. Somebody asks, will response, the created post, both contain the same response value. If you're talking about the variable in line 23 response, that's not the same as created post. The variable in line 23 holds a response object that contains information about the response, including the body. Now, all we care about is the body, so we need to extract the body and convert that to JSON, that is a JavaScript object. That's why we call response.json function here. And that value is a promise that fulfills with the extracted body, which is just a JavaScript object with the created post, because that's what we built in the server side and send it back. Okay, once we got that breakpoint in there, I'm going to refresh. And I'm going to go down here and click send to trigger this function call. And you can see paused and breakpoint. And you can see here, line 26, it's waiting. So we can hover the mouse over created post to see its value. Or you can see on the sides here, the variables. If you scroll down, so on. Now let me click Control backtick. Let me see if we can work that out here. In Chrome, it usually works. Let me go to console, site created post. So it seems like an object. There's nothing. You can see the post was made with the title hello here. See, this is what we send. We sent to the backend. Now response is not returning anything. Something is wrong. Let's try to figure out what's going on. Go back to Visual Studio Code. Rec.body. One way you can figure out what's going on here is you can console log, like I said, new post, like so. But you gotta watch out in the browser, the server-side terminal, you gotta watch out what's going on. So maybe keep an eye on this server-side terminal for that console log as we're gonna go to the browser and try to do the same thing again. Click play to keep going. And then we're gonna go here and click send. Oops, I didn't send with anything, so let me refresh. There's a hello there. Click send. Watch the terminal. You can see here, there's a problem, right? New post is something's title undefined. So we got to figure that out. Okay. And I think I know what the problem is. So when we send the data, we didn't say we're sending JSON. So I think that's what the problem is. So going back to the front end, here, we make this request, right, with fetch. But we're not telling the server, hey, we're sending JSON. It's in JSON format. So we got to go here in the code for the front end where we make the fetch. We need to also include some header for the content type. So we're going to go here and say headers and pass an object. And let's put quotes because we have a dash content type colon application / JSON. Now, what is it doing? Okay, in this request, we're setting the header for content type to application JSON so that the server will know, hey, we're sending JSON to you. So make sure to, when you parsing the body of the request, you extract using the JSON middleware. Now save that and let's try again. Watch the terminal as we go to the browser and click play, refresh, have the hello and click send. Let's see the terminal again. Now it says hello there. See that? So we had forgot to let the server know that we're sending JSON from the front end. So it's important we have the header for content type set there as well. And we can do so by setting the headers object in the fetch, the second argument of options, like so.